It appears today is ex-Winnipeg Jet Day as well. Not only have we seen news about Patrik Laine, but Paul Maurice is one win away from a Stanley Cup final. Let's talk about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, like I said, we have a bit of a theme, I suppose. Ex-Jets, whether it's coaching, staff, or players. Seems to be some real fun stuff happening around the NHL with folks who were formerly associated with the Winnipeg Jets. Or perhaps in some ways, maybe not so great if you're Patrik Laine. But you know what? Fresh starts for everyone, big results for a lot of folks. And at the center of all of it is Paul Maurice, apparently now finding himself one win away from a Stanley Cup final. I titled this The Oilers Have Fumbled just because it's really funny. I can't believe this is going to happen potentially again. Somehow Paul Maurice is on the verge of sweeping the Oilers in the playoffs another time. It's really funny that it happened once. It's even funnier that it might happen again. I don't know what he has against the city of Edmonton, but apparently it has followed him with the Panthers. Not that, I mean, that's necessarily the real, tactical analysis, right? It's just funny, though, when you think about all of the possible outcomes for not only a playoff series, but also a cup finals. Another defeat of the Oilers that could be a 4-game sweep, probably not something you would expect too often, but man, it might happen again. We'll talk about what has happened in the series in just a quick moment. But before we go any further, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, like I said, somehow Paul Maurice has found himself on the verge of another sweep of the Oilers in the playoffs. Didn't think that was going to happen again. But it's, again, like I said, really funny. I think where you see the Oilers really struggling is that a lot of what they've had to do this playoffs is basically live off of McDraisaitl, which, look, McDraisaitl gets you a lot, right? You're talking about two of the league's best players, and that can get you really far, especially if the goaltending holds up just enough to let them get through. I think the biggest problem is, the Oilers haven't really been perfect. McDraisaitl hasn't really been as noticeable this series, and it's not for a lack of trying. I mean, you've seen McDavid cut in against the Panthers defense and really try to create some good chances, but it just hasn't really amounted to much. And even when McDavid or Draisaitl or Hyman or any of their other top offensive stars actually get into good shooting spots, they often get saved by Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky has been a next level barrier between them and success. And unfortunately for the Oilers, it's probably going to be the end. I think this might be one of their best ever chances to actually win a Stanley Cup. They haven't really been in this position in a long, long time. And to me, it's doubtful that they're going to get there again anytime soon with how the league is moving. With how the Oilers are built and what's kind of happened to their roster. I just have a really hard time imagining Edmonton getting back to the state anytime soon. I think this is kind of one of those one-and-done sort of runs, and I'm not sure if it's really replicable. McDavid and Draisaitl will always be good, I'm sure. That I don't really question. What I do question is their ability to actually get back to a cup finals because of how much it takes to even get to this point. If you think about the run and how they got here, some pretty extraordinary circumstances had to happen, and McDavid and Draisaitl really turned it up at a level that you don't often see from players really at all. They had one of the craziest playoff runs, and then you had Bouchard being an elite top defender. And it hasn't really been enough when push comes to shove because, they're facing off against the Panthers. And the one thing that I said about this series that would be a real challenge for them is that you're talking about a Panthers team that's super deep. And if you make mistakes against Florida, they're going to take advantage. I think, the expectation was that if the Panthers made mistakes, the Oilers would be the ones to capitalize. But it kind of cuts both ways, right? The Panthers are just deeper in almost all facets. And when Florida is able to take advantage of those mistakes, jump those routes and run along with these counters, it's brutal. You think back at the first goal of the game tonight where Edmonton got caught shorthanded at, Florida's blue line. That was ultimately enough to decide the outcome of this game. It was a 4-3 victory for the Panthers. And, you think about that goal and how it happened on an Oilers power play with some of the best players in the world. And at that point, you just sort of know it's probably the end. When mistakes happen from Edmonton, whether they're giveaways or they get outworked in the corners, they make a bad pass and get picked off. Ultimately, it just feels like, this is not Edmonton's year, and maybe they're just not going to be able to get it done with McDavid. Now, obviously this is not to say that they're never going to be in this position again, but it's just so hard to get back to the state. And I look at how far they've come, and if this is how it ends for them, it's going to be soul-crushing. To me, I think back to when the Jets lost, against the Knights a few years ago, and I thought it was going to be the start of something special with the Jets. And Winnipeg instead basically had one run, and that was just about it. Winnipeg wasn't really able to get back to, a real competitive state in the years following. I mean, they had some good playoff moments, but overall, right, you think about the difference between the Jets team that year and what they did in the following seasons. And, they had some solid offensive performances and stuff, but overall, they did not really live up to the expectations of all of those magazines and articles. I kept calling them a dynasty. Winnipeg fall off quick, and Edmonton wasn't really built to even look like a dynasty. I mean, you've got some phenomenal players, but, traditionally they haven't really been supremely deep. And so I think to myself, how can they really expect to get much further than this? And so I don't know. If you're an Oilers fan, I would feel pretty queasy about how this has ended. Not to rub salt in the wound, but I mean, this feels like this was one of your few shots that you're ever going to have with McDavid, and you couldn't get it done. Not to say it's never going to happen again, but oof. For Paul Maurice, this is probably the feather in his cap. Man, he had, it's kind of frustrating that he goes to the Panthers and immediately does really well, because I wish it would have been for the Jets. There was a moment where it seemed like he might push the Jets to a cup final, and instead we didn't get that, and the Panthers have twice in a row, and they might actually win this time. So, man, do I watch this team and just think, why couldn't it be us, man? But I guess for the Panthers, they're about to, have to turn over a lot of their roster because cap situation is going to be coming up. A lot of their players are expiring after this season, and they can only afford to keep so many guys before things probably start to slip by the wayside here. So this was probably one of their last big hurrahs with this group of players, and dang, dude, they have they have gone almost the full distance. They just need to win one more and finish the fight. I guess if you're an Oilers fan, the only thing that you can really lean your hat on here is that Edmonton has pulled some stuff out of the fire before, but I don't know, man. 3 games down in the series, and you really have to go back on the road to even scratch out a potential game 5, or like a game 6. I don't think you're going to be seeing that happening. I think even if the Oilers win the next game, Florida has this series more or less wrapped up. So we'll have to see what happens. I am open to being surprised, but I think we all can see the writing on the wall when it comes to Edmonton's chances in this postseason run. But let me know your thoughts on the series so far. Are you happy for Maurice? Are you rooting for the Panthers? Let me know what you're thinking for the final couple of games in the series in the comments below, or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Now, of course, Winnipeg has, more than a few, related players in the news recently. Patrik Laine might be looking for a fresh start. We'll talk about where he might be up to or where he might be off to and what's going on with him, where he actually might fit in the grand scheme of things in just a little bit. But before we get ahead of ourselves, just wanted to shout out a couple of our friends. The first I wanted to shout out is our friends at Game Time. When it comes to buying tickets, a lot of you know that, well, buying tickets can be a huge pain in the butt. You get hit with surprise fees, hidden charges, and sometimes you're buying tickets blindly. You're not sure where you're sitting other than like a seat map or something, and guess what? You might have an obstructed view, and nobody wants that unless you're a weirdo and you go to the Fenway Park and you really love that giant column that sits in front of you. Some people are into that. That's great. But Game Time knows that a lot of you don't like that kind of stuff. And they don't want you to be surprised, right? They want to give you killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and it all comes back with their lowest price guarantee. They also have become an official partner with the NBA, and so they're offering a great chance to get NBA Finals tickets, which, hey, that's another series that is almost winding down. Seems like the Boston Celtics are about to finish that one off. And if you want to watch the Celtics pull off another big title, guess what? Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off. So if you're thinking about making that ticket purchase, now would be a great time. You can take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I also wanted to shout out our friends and partners at Policy Genius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Listen, I get hurt apparently at concerts. I've torn something in my knee. I've shattered my wrist. But you know what? A lot of folks have even bigger scenarios and situations that they can't prepare for, and Policy Genius is here to help. They are the country's leading online insurance marketplace, and it makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Personally, I can say I don't know much about the policy world, so there's a lot of jargon. It can be hard to figure out what you're covered for and what you aren't. And look, when it comes to like hospital bills and stuff, it is really important that you get it right, and that's why Policy Genius is convenient and time-saving. They help walk you through the steps of picking the right plan for you. They help you compare quotes. They'll try and explain it in very straightforward terms. They want to arm you with all of the best options, and they have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can always trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. So get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance policy with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for joining us on tonight's episode as we're chatting about some former Jets kind of being a little bit in the news, which is kind of fun. You don't often see that. I suppose I would prefer if it was about current Winnipeg players having some really cool offseason stuff, but we're just going to have to settle for other former Jets either looking for a change of scenery or, in the case of Paul Maurice, about to win a friggin' Stanley Cup. Also, Dmitry Kulikov, forgot to mention him. He's also about to be a Cup winner. How about that? But one guy who's been in the news the past day or two is actually Patrik Laine. He's a Blue Jacket, and it sounds like he doesn't want to be anymore. We're going to dive into what that could mean for one of the league's premier talents when it comes to goal scoring in just a quick moment. But before we get too much further, though, just thought you should know for all of you Fox or ESPN Sports listeners and watchers, if you find yourself having to turn down the volume because there's too much shouting, you should make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you daily to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming daily 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, like I said, Patrik Laine, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they're heading for a separation. And it seems like they're trying to work on some trade options, which looking at Laine's contract, that's going to be a little bit of a tough sell. He's paid a good deal of money. He gets hurt a lot. And honestly, I just don't know that there are that many teams out there that can really take on that salary and actually want to. Now, for me, I kind of wonder if there's a team that's maybe trying to hit not necessarily the cap ceiling or cap floor, but perhaps they do need to occupy some cap space, and they might be willing to take a risk on a player who, look, if he rehabs and has a really good season, maybe he becomes an asset that you can flip at the trade deadline. I think he's an intriguing player for a couple of reasons. There have been moments with the Blue Jackets where he looked like he'd really grown his game, especially in his defensive responsibility and in his overall leadership. And, he's still got a pretty lethal release. But the other part of him that's been a real problem is that he gets hurt a lot. He's made of glass at times. And all of those accumulated injuries do catch up with you, whether it's your mobility, your shooting arm, in some cases, if it's an upper body thing. It's tough to fight through it. I mean, just look at how Velarde has had to go through so many scenarios of serious injuries that have kind of waylaid a lot of his progress. It sucks. It's really unfortunate. And as somebody who still has a big soft spot for Laine, it hurts me to see him do this and struggle this much. I still love him. I still wish things had ended differently with him in Winnipeg, but you really can't unring the bell. I know I sometimes joke about bringing him back, but I think those days are long since past. I try to think about some teams that could potentially take him on, and I think it's a weird fit, man. One team I kind of wonder about is Utah. I don't know how much dead cap they're working with right now, and thanks to Cap Friendly being gone, it's harder to actually find some of this information. But assuming they could make the money work, I wonder if Utah might be willing to take a risk. I mean, they're a team that's got, a couple of really decent players. But if you're talking about like a reclamation project and you don't want to give up a lot of assets or futures for somebody, instead you actually might get paid in some ways to take on a big deal like that. Maybe Laine could go to this Utah Hockey Club. That's actually their name, by the way. It's Utah Hockey Club. All those names and things that they trademarked, they ain't using it. Utah Hockey Club is it. The jersey looks like the PWHL with just the city name, which is kind of funny. All of that to just pick Utah Hockey Club, huh? But I wonder if Laine would be willing to go there. Fresh change of scenery. It's away from Columbus a bit, and it's a brand new team that looks like it's going to have a massive fan base. That could be a good place. You think about other teams that maybe could try. Carolina would have been an interesting fit if he didn't get hurt and if the Canes actually had cap space. They don't really tend to have that kind of situation financially, and they don't really like to tie up lots of money in individual contracts. I tend to get the sense that their ownership team is kind of on the cheaper side. So you're looking for some place for Laine to land, and I don't know how you really make it fit. His contract's not cheap. You probably have to retain some salary at least, and even if you do, right? How many games is he realistically going to play next season? Don't know. He's had some surgeries and stuff over the years. He's had tons of missed time. I don't know what he is at this stage of his career. I wish I had more confidence in his ability to stay healthy because, he probably could hit 35 to 40 goals again if he was able to have a full season on a talented squad. But I just don't know if he's going to find that role. And much as I sentimentally love him and would love to see him in a Jets uniform one day again, that bridge was burned ages ago, and I just can't see a strong fit. But they're going to try and make something happen. Maybe you see something crazy like Buffalo make a play for him. I've heard that they've been really active exploring trade options, which sounds like a threat sometimes. If you're a Sabres fan, no offense, your front office makes some real puzzling decisions. But Laine, for me, I will always still have a soft spot for him. I think a lot of Jets fans feel the same. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have is that I just hope he does well somewhere. He deserves to be happy. I think he gave us some really cool years. And, man, when he first came to Winnipeg, dude, he was so much fun to watch. I will always admire that absolutely dominant release that he has. And it'd be nice if he gets to a team and he just absolutely lights it up again. I'd love to kind of relive some of that fun of the good old days. And if he can find a way to pull it off again, I think we'd all enjoy watching Patrik Laine do Patrik Laine stuff. But where that's going to be, I couldn't even begin to tell you. There's just not many teams that can take on the cap hit and that are willing to take on that much risk. But there's got to be someone out there who thinks that he could be a good salvage project. I hate to even describe Patrik Laine as a reclamation project, but I kind of think that's where he is at this stage of his career. Things haven't gone very smoothly over the last few years. Columbus has been a smoldering wreck of a team, and Laine has kind of looked like he's just felt, out of place. And perhaps it's time for him to get back into the fold and actually get to a team that will genuinely make him feel happy about hockey once again. But let me know where you want to see him go. Is there a team that you would love to see Laine move to? If it's, Winnipeg or another team, let me know in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Now, closing us out tonight, just wanted to talk about one more thing. Arniel has made some interesting overtures about Nik Ehlers and apparently a few other players. I'm going to spend some time talking about what he's up to and how this could have an interesting ramification for what the Jets do with Ehlers in his final contract year. Let's get into that because it's going to be complicated and probably messy, and it could leave a lot of us really upset. But before we dive into that particular decision, maybe you want to actually pretend to be a GM and give your best Ehlers trade scenario in Ultimate Hockey GM. Locked On Jets fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your own franchise? Do you think you can run the Jets better than Chevy? Well, your dream might come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Jets fan, you know there's no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point, and you know what? It's sometimes going to help your team's chances, and that's a reason why I think you're going to love this game. This is where you can simulate all of your dream scenarios. Ultimate Hockey GM is also completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as much as you want and when you want to. And best of all, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store. Make sure to check them out. Download the game. Just visit hockeygm.app or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. Hey friends, welcome to tonight's closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for joining us on tonight's episode as we're just wrapping up with some closing thoughts from Scott Arniel, making some very interesting overtures about a couple of upcoming free agents. Chief among them, Nik Ehlers. But apparently he wants all of his free agents back, and that includes Sean Monahan. You've heard me talk about Monahan and why I don't really feel like that's the best choice. You've also heard me talk about Brendan Dillon, and I've had somebody call me basically crazy saying that the Jets should not re-sign Dillon and that you need more players like him. And I think it sort of misses the point that I made about the Jets needing to do a couple of things. And for Dillon, for instance, right, he's, one of the things is he's mobile for his size, and that's absolutely true. He's not slow, but compared to a lot of the world's fastest skaters, Dillon sometimes struggles to keep up. There's only one player on the Winnipeg's blue line right now that can consistently track against some of the top defenders, and it's Morrissey. Everyone else is going to have flat-footed moments. DeMello has made up for it in a lot of ways, and I think Brendan Dillon's kind of that similar style of guy who maybe he doesn't have the world's top-end skating as much as he used to, but he can still keep up pretty well. But the problem is that you need him to do more than just keep up. You need him to be a real creator from the back end because Winnipeg's offensive structure has kind of been a little so-so, especially with blue line involvement. Dillon had a career year this past season, and that was awesome. Like I said, and I've maintained this ever since, he's one of the few expiring free agents where if the Jets found a way to make it work, zero complaints from me. I'd be fine with it. But I just also know that the Jets probably need to make a change on the back end, and this might be a natural separation point. He's also, in his early 30s, and that kind of style that he has tends to not age super well. So you have to think about the future, and Dillon is probably, entering the slow down curve of his career. So you just don't want to tie a lot of money up in that. You need to be flexible and open up space, probably to spend more on the forwards, because that's where you need help. And I'm sure Monahan is probably in that category of players the Jets would like to bring back. But I really think, again, his lack of foot speed in particular was really noticeable in the playoffs. The Avs really exposed it. And I think we just saw that for as well as he played in the regular season, what the Jets need down at 2C, he couldn't deliver. It's really unfortunate because I do actually like him a lot. And I thought that he was a great pickup for what the Jets paid, but it just seems like he wasn't able to really translate his regular season success into the postseason. And so it's a shame, but I think you've got to let both of those guys probably go. The one that's most interesting is that he says he wants Ehlers to be a major top 6 player for him in the postseason. Or not in the postseason, but in this upcoming season. So, he is very much acknowledging that, Ehlers is expiring pretty soon. Nik has not really indicated that he wants to return. Darren Dreger did say one interesting thing, that he's not really unhappy. Like, he's not angry, but he just doesn't really want to extend, which makes me wonder what the relationship at this stage is like. Is there something that you could actually salvage? Or is this at this point past the point of no return? And I think I lean towards that. I think regardless of what happens this upcoming season, Ehlers is probably gone. Where I'm curious, to know is if he sticks around for the whole year, right? The Jets may look at the market and look at the trade offers and think, you know what, we're not really getting what we want. And depending on where the Jets are in the playoff picture, they might just opt to keep him. You keep him for a rental for the whole season, and maybe you get more value out of him. My guess is by the trade deadline, they've negotiated some deal for him. And based on some of the trade returns that they've got for some of their other players, could be a good one. But I just wonder with Ehlers, is the market really going to be that impressive? I don't know. It's tough to say. He's been underutilized. His point totals have been held in check. On top of like some of his injury history, I just don't really know what you're realistically going to get for him. So I don't want to say that, retaining Scheifele would actually, or Ehlers would be better for the upcoming season, but maybe you just run it out and see what happens. I don't know. It's a weird situation. I think you'd prefer to get something for him rather than nothing, but you also don't want to throw away the value that he brings to the team. So I would be curious to know what offers are on the table. I'd love to know what teams are asking about him. He is one of the most dynamic players on this team, and when it comes to skating and speed, he's got loads of it. And I think Arniel is intelligent to point out those specific assets. Not that I think Arniel was an idiot or anything, far from it. It's nice to hear a coach for the Jets actively talk about speed and skill, which is something that the Jets traditionally don't rely upon. But we'll see what Arnie's up to. I'm prepared to start calling it Arnie's Army going forward. I feel like he's got the right headspace for a lot of things. And it seems like the lessons that he took away from Columbus and from his time as a Jets assistant coach might really be showing through. And I'm happy for him. I mean, you think about some of the stuff that he's had over the, first few years as like a coach in the NHL. And I'm sure it felt really humiliating and embarrassing to be in the position that he was. And he had to go through some really tough stuff with his locker room dynamics. So glad to see that he really took away some crucial lessons. And I would love to see what he has managed to take away from it and how he wants to use that to inform his Jets tenure. Because I think he could be a legitimately really cool coach. And if he wants to push the Jets forward, as I've said before, I'm super down with it. I think he's got some interesting ideas that he's talked about already with how he wants to really redefine how Winnipeg approaches team construction and stuff. And if that starts to bleed onto the on-ice impact, hey, man, could be a fantastic hire. So a lot to digest, a lot for the Jets to consider, but we're just going to have to take it day by day and see how it goes. Let me know what you're thinking with Ehlers, Monahan, Dillon, the rest of them in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. But for tonight's episode, that's going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow for even more off-season coverage. So as always, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and have a great night. Go Jets, go.